Hello, Will.
Hello, Jonathan.
You are, what are you? You're a drummer,
That's true, but so much more.
but so
Have we
much more.
started? Is this official?
We could start now if you want.
Okay. I
Yeah,
just, I didn't know if there was preamble, if there was, if we were flirting, or,
yeah. No,
if there was foreplay, or we were just getting into it.
this is fine.
Okay,
This
cool.
is fine. So you're a drummer, among other things.
True.
Yeah, I also struggle with that. I feel like musician is like, I'm like 20% musician.
Yes, but the problem with me is that once I go away from that, I'm like, well, what do I call the rest of me? And then
Well,
it gets worse. So I backtrack. I'm like, yeah, drummer, 100%. That's me. I'm a
right.
drummer.
Yeah. Drummer and water.
Yeah, 99% water, 1% drummer.
When did you start playing drums?
I think I moved around in elementary school from instrument to instrument and landed on the drums in fifth grade.
Okay. And then when was your first band playing drums?
I would say first band probably started in middle school somewhere.
Okay.
It was not good, and it was just like Sunday afternoons. Somebody's parents would drop them off, and we would make some noise. But I don't think I played a show until high school. I don't think any of the music or bands that I was doing in middle school was like, even able to play a show or an event, even in school or anything like that.
Sure. And where was this?
This was in New York, growing up on Long Island.
Long Island.
Yeah.
Okay, so what was the actual first show that you can remember?
Probably some kind of battle of the bands type thing, or like, like a high school like talent night or whatever that might entail.
And at this point, do you recall like if you were your ambitions to be a drummer for the rest of your life, or were you just having fun?
I can't remember if I knew that was a possibility. It's hard to go. I have a terrible memory,
Sure,
and
me too.
uh, I associate that with like my lack of emotions and stuff. But like, I don't know what I was feeling or thinking at the time. Not just like can't remember when I did this or what a person's name was, but when there's a good chance that I didn't think about the future. I don't think about the future much now either, but I guess throughout the 4 years of high school, I started to go to more local shows and realized that I could be playing those types of shows. So I thought that was a distinct possibility, and that was probably where my aspirations were, because it seemed more realistic. I saw other people playing these shows at VFW halls and
I
things
can
like
do
that.
that.
Yeah, exactly. It was like, oh, that's a real thing. We should try and get on the show. We're kind of just as good as them. And then, and then it started to happen. You start to like play shows with other bands, and then you book little like the Sunday matinee at that shitty bar that, lets all ages shows happen at 2 p.m. on a Sunday. And there's like 15 bands. So we do that, and then, it grew and grew. So, I was playing local shows and it made sense. But even then, I might have thought maybe I could go on tour one day, but I
Right.
didn't really think about what I was going to be when I grew up.
Sure. And when did Breaking Pangea come into the picture?
Breaking Pangea came in a few years later. That was in college.
Okay. Was that your first notable band?
Well, notable is sort of a loaded word and up to interpretation. But uh,
To you.
prior to me, there was actually a band that I joined when I was still in high school. It was some older guys who had a band called Sleeposaurus. But when I joined the band, we changed the name to Long Distance Runner,
Mm.
and that band was able to actually play a bunch of shows. Like when I was in high school, I played Irving Plaza, and that was crazy.
In New York.
Yeah, in New
Yeah.
York, sorry, in New York City. And we played like the Mercury Lounge and a bunch of other like venues because they were kind of plugged into a system. Um, they were like 23, 24, 25, and I was 17, maybe turning 18 at some point.
Wow.
So I actually, things were going really well, and they got like a small label deal and a small publishing deal. And I actually put off college. That was like in that senior year where you start to get responses from colleges.
Right.
And I remember specifically, I think it was Washington University. It was somewhere in DC that I applied for a music program. and they replied and said, "Hey, you have to come down and do an audition." And I just blew it off because I was playing in this band, and I was like, "Well, screw that. This is what I'm gonna do." So we ended up going on recording and going on tour in the fall when I should have been going to my freshman year of college.
Right.
But by the end of that sort of cycle, I guess by, let's say, January, mid-year, or mid-school year, the band kind of like fizzled, it broke up. So I just kind of like picked things up, took a couple of classes at a community school, community college, and then set up my college entrance or whatever acceptance for Drexel University in Philly for that fall. So while all my friends went to college for their first year, I kind of tried to do the band thing and went on tour with this other band, and then it didn't work out. So I was like about a year behind.
Yeah.
Which doesn't matter at all, but at the time it's like a weird thing. But yeah, so then it wasn't until mid-year of my freshman year of college in Philly that I found Fred and started playing with Breaking Pangea. So that was, I guess it didn't do much, but Long Distance Runner was really my first time going on tour and playing shows in other, significantly in that way, in a touring sense, across the country.
Right. What did you go to college for?
I studied economics.
Okay. Why?
My brain just works in a way that it made sense. So when I was in high school, I was a pretty good student, kind of a classic underachiever kind of person. And when I took my econ class, the teacher pulled me aside and said, "Hey, people typically either get this or don't get this, and you get this. I want to put you in my AP class." And he checked. I guess I had an off period or something, and it worked out. I actually did really well, even in comparison to the smart kids. So I don't know. It made an impression on me. Not only did it make sense and I enjoyed it, but I was like, hey, I'm naturally better at this than most people, even like the smart people who are working very hard to try and get it. So I was like, well, this seems like a no-brainer. Like I should just, if while I'm doing music, great. But like as a backup, why not do the thing that other people can't do that comes naturally?
Yeah. Did you have any kind of vision for like what kind of job you would get regarding economics?
No, that the weird part about econ is that like it's such a weird, I think of it as like a social science. Like you're studying human behavior and you're sort of predicting what people will do given, basically it's about scarcity. You have a finite number of resources. How do you allocate them? How do you make decisions based on two competing goods? But it's not like you're making up a set of rules. Like accounting, to me, people often associate it with econ, but to me, accounting is just a made up system. Someone decided that this is how we're going to associate costs and expenses and income and break it down and organize it in this way. It seems man-made. You could have a different system, and there are probably factions within a given accounting system and different styles. But with econ, I mean, there are different schools of econ and different schools of thought, but really it's all based on like observing behaviors and trying to predict what people are doing in the same way as like us, not the same, but in similar, I think, to a sociology or a psychology.
Sure.
So anyway, to answer your question, I don't know. At the time, it really just seemed like this is fun and easy to me, and it's difficult for everyone else. So it seems like an opportunity. But what I would have done with it, I don't know. Like I'm pretty lucky that I never had to find out.
Right.
But yeah, I wasn't sure. I was just going to run with it and figure it out later.
And you enjoyed college?
Yeah. I mean, at one point in Drexel, I actually went over to UPenn, which is very close. They're both in West Philly. And I actually talked to them about transferring, and they really tried to dissuade me, which was funny, talking about how hard it was and how few people were able to transfer, just because I wasn't really being challenged at Drexel. Their econ program wasn't really robust. It was kind of lumped into the School of Business. Okay. And like I said, I don't see econ fitting in so much with the marketing and accounting and finance, but that's how they did. That's how they lumped it in and categorized it. So, so I actually tried to leave at one point, but I did like Drexel's, they had an intern program called the Co-op, and basically, depending on the program you choose, but you would spend 3 6-month periods working an actual job in potentially in the field that you might go into.
Yeah.
And since I had really no clue what I would do with it, it seemed like a really good opportunity to figure out what either you want or maybe more importantly, what you definitely don't want to be doing in the future.
Yeah, that does seem helpful.
Right. So, I mean, I just, it seemed like a way to avoid spending 4 years studying something, coming out, and then spending a year or two finding out this is not what you wanted to do and having to start over.
Yeah.
You can sort of correct the ship or the direction of the ship as you're midway through the journey.
Sure. And so then how does your band Breaking Pangea form during this time?
Well, that's the thing. Music was always my first priority, even though I was, adamant about trying to, make sure my backup option, which is really the more realistic, the higher likelihood of panning out
Right.
option. So I was in school, but I was still focused on music. I was looking for musicians to play with, and I ended up seeing Fred's old band called Brody play in a basement, like at this party in West Philly, and they were good. And I just met the bass player or found the bass player online and chatted him up, and it turned out they were in a transition and looking to start something new. And yeah, so we got together, we jammed, and there was that chemistry, and it really worked out. So we just started building and growing from there. And then every break that I had between semesters and everything, we would just book a 5 or 10 day tour, whatever it was. We would do weekend shows. Philly was a great spot to play out of. We would go up to Boston on a weekend. We could go out to Ohio on a weekend. We could get down to like DC and Virginia. There were a lot of opportunities while maintaining my like schedule at college.
Yeah, there's a lot within a small area on the East Coast.
Yeah, for sure.
And how long did that band last?
I would say about 3 to 4 years. We put out 2 EPs and one full length, and then it was actually in full swing. We had just put out an EP with Equal Vision Records. I think it was in 2000. I want to say 2003, and at that point, Taking Back Sunday, two of the guys had just left, and there was like some turmoil there, not sure of if it was going to be continuing as a band, blah, blah, blah. And I was speaking with Eddie, the guitarist, and he had just mentioned how lucky I was to have Fred and how great of a guitarist he was, and blah, blah, blah. Because they're old bands, had played shows together.
Okay.
Eddie, I think, was in a band. I think it was Mind Over Matter, or maybe it was Clockwise. Either way, Long Island bands that, way back. And Fred's old band, Brody, had played shows together, so they had a history. And I sort of got the impression that Eddie thought Fred would fit in Taking Back Sunday, and I raised the question. I was like, yo, do you want Fred to play in Taking Back Sunday? Because that's like a huge opportunity for him. He's got like a kid on the way, and Breaking Pangea was doing better than, we were like on an upswing, but like not anything close to what Taking Back Sunday was doing at the time. Like at the time, Taking Back Sunday had just put out their first record, and it was growing in an insane way. Like no one had ever seen, in the world that we came from,
Right.
that growth was like unprecedented. Like them and Brand New were coming up at the same time and just growing like crazy. So I actually was, made a little bit of a sacrifice to be like, hey, it would suck to not have a band, but Fred, would love this opportunity. That would be huge for him. So that was when Fred actually got the audition to try out for Taking Back Sunday, and he actually went up to New York and did it and got it. So Breaking Pangea had to cancel all our summer tour plans, and I was kind of left with the open summer. So I actually moved back up to New York, bought a surfboard, and was going to hang out with my parents and just go to the beach and surf and like figure it out.
Wow.
But it's a weird world, but that's exactly when I met up with Sean and John, who left Taking Back Sunday, and they needed a drummer and a band, and I needed a band. So we actually started Stray Light Run from those remains.
Oh, wow.
So
yeah,
it was a really weird coincidence of Fred and I splitting up Breaking Pangea, him going to play with Taking Back Sunday, and then me going to play with the two guys that left Taking Back Sunday. And it worked out for both of us.
Had you graduated by this point?
Yes, during Breaking Pangea, I actually deferred one semester. I took one semester off to tour. That was our first like 2 or 3 month like full time touring, like all, cross country and
Yeah.
everything. But then I went back and finished up and got my degree. So I was able to finish and get my econ degree.
And then Stray Let Run, where did you guys were you based out of? Long Island?
Yeah, I had moved back up, and John and Sean both lived on Long Island, and Michelle, who was also in the band, John's sister. All three of them were all basically, you know, in the same neighborhood, same town, kind of. And it wasn't too far from where my parents lived. Actually, the craziest part of all of this is that Sean and I, the bass player from Taking Back Sunday and then Stray Light Run, and myself used to play music like in that middle school band when someone's parents would drop them off every Sunday afternoon.
Oh wow.
Sean was one of those people that my friend from high school met. I guess maybe it was middle school. Yeah, my friend from middle school met at like some summer camp, and then, you know, Sean and some other kid, they were friends, and it was just the weirdest thing. Like when we were like 12 or 13, we like jammed together in a basement, and then 5 or 6 or 8 years later, whatever it is, we're playing like real shows in front of real people, putting out records, and
Yeah, it's such a small world.
really is.
Yeah. And so what was that like starting Straight Light Run with you just leaving your band and them obviously leaving their band that was doing pretty well at the time?
For me, it was, well, looking back, it was amazing, and it was like a huge opportunity, but it was a little bit stressful. I wasn't really prepared for it because with Breaking Pangea, I had to work really hard. All of us, all three of us, had to work really hard to keep it going. We were constantly hustling because we were that young band that no one really cared about. So we were fighting for everything we got, and that was my like mode. And then when I started playing with Stray Light Run, it came with such a huge momentum and buzz from John and Sean leaving Taking Back Sunday. But by the time we just started jamming and having a demo online, there were fans.
Right.
And that was so much bigger of a band and an experience and a thing than I was ever used to. So when we went on tour, we were able to either headline or do support tours, but we weren't big enough to have really a crew. So I ended up tour managing a lot, and I don't think I was adjusted well enough. I think I was still like stressing out. I was taking things a little too seriously because I came from a place where I was kind of like fighting for everything.
Sure.
Whereas now I could have like laid back and been a little more not forgiving, but I think things could have been easier for the people around me and myself if I had felt more like comfortable and confident and laid back in the situation that we were in.
Sure. There's a lot to learn.
Yeah, exactly. It was a learning curve, and but overall it was great, and it was crazy. It was really exciting. It was a cool moment because I think people were really worried about losing Taking Back Sunday as a band as they kind of split up and they weren't sure about what was going to happen. And then Taking Back Sunday continuing was great, but Stray Light coming out of that, just the interaction with those fans was really amazing for me to experience coming from a small band.
Sure.
And having that support. It was like a really special moment. Everything kind of felt like special and fresh, and like it kind of, I don't know, there was an excitement at the time
And so
when we were starting that band.
Did Stray Let Run like already come with a record deal and agents and stuff like that, or did you have to build that up?
It was sort of in place. We had to renegotiate the deal because they were on Victory Records, your friendly local Chicago label.
I've heard of them.
So yeah, so they had a deal. So John and Sean were still tied to Victory, and then Michelle and myself were not. So we had to renegotiate something there. And we actually did a bunch of like major label talks. Had the possibility of buying them out or buying us out and blah blah blah. But I think that Victory Records, as you may or may not know, it tends to be like a little bit of a handful, or they have a reputation and things like that. So I think the easiest way for us to do it was to negotiate and finish the contract.
Yeah.
So we basically modified the contract that John and Sean were under through Taking Back Sunday to include Michelle and myself, and we ended up putting out one full length and one EP on Victory before we were able to leave.
Yeah, and Stray Let Run ended up being pretty successful.
Yeah, there was that building off the momentum of that start. It was a really good run for like the first 2 years were really exciting. Um, and then things kind of like cooled off after that period. It was kind of coincidental, sort of the tail end of the Victory experience. We put out an EP, and they weren't as excited to support an EP as the last release of their band. They said it in not so vague terms that they had other priorities
Yeah.
as far as bands that had two more records on the label, and that's understandable. So the support dropped off there, and then we went away for a while to make our second full length. Ended up signing with a major that I don't think was a good fit. I mean, in hindsight, I don't think anyone thinks it was a good fit. At the time, I was like, yeah, sure, this is exciting. It's cool. But yeah, that record was pretty soft as far as like the release and the reception and stuff. So we kind of just, plateaued into a slow descent there, and things got kind of sparse. John was doing solo stuff. Michelle was kind of doing a project.
And what year was this?
Sort of towards the end. Well, I guess the whole project, Straylight, started in 2003 when Breaking Pangea ended, and yeah, our first record in 2004. The last record maybe 2007. Maybe putting out. I think we ended up putting out some singles, some vinyl, like self-releasing stuff towards the end. Maybe 2008, 2009.
And that was the last. You didn't join another band right after that.
No, at the tail end of that, I did a little bit of like session work, filling in for people, like recording with some friends, things like that. But at that point, I actually started tour managing a hip hop artist, I think, through a friend who had done it and was moving on to a different project. So I was bouncing around doing tour management, and that's actually when I talked to Scott about tour managing a project of yours called the Young Veins.
Yeah, that's how we met. You were the Young Veins tour manager. For the 2 tours we actually went on.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was the period when Straylight kind of wrapped up, and before I found a new project. Because I had tour managed so many of my previous bands, it was kind of a natural transition, because there's always bands going out, and they always need a different, everybody needs a tour manager. So
Sure.
that made sense, and it's sort of an easy transition.
Well, if I remember correctly, we were kind of a handful.
Yeah, I mean, but everybody is in their own way.
Sure.
But, we made it to all the shows.
We did. And I think we only crashed the van a couple times.
But I think there was just one deer, and I think Nick did a great job of avoiding it.
Yeah.
Was there another crash?
Maybe not. Maybe it's just all blur in my mind.
Yeah, I think the worst thing that I remember is just getting stuck in a side alley in Los Angeles with the trailer,
right.
and having to unload the trailer at like 6 a.m. Just so we could move it 3 feet or 2 feet, and then packing it back up.
Man, and I still think about that time. That was probably not a good idea, because we literally unloaded a trailer so we could move the trailer by ourselves with our hands.
Yeah.
On a steep hill. I mean, if any of us lost a grip, that thing would have taken off.
Right. Well, I think that we had planned sort of for it. I think I think the van was sitting in front, like downhill. If
That's
I remember correctly,
Yeah.
I think we were trying to make a right turn steep, and the trailer just wasn't going to make it. So I think that the van would have stopped it, but unfortunately we didn't have any other options. It was one of those things. You get into a situation you're like, can't go back, can't go forward.
Just got to figure it out.
Yeah.
And so what did you do after the Young Veins?
Well, I think in between or during the Young Veins, I was also tour managing that hip hop artist, and we actually ended up doing some festivals in Europe with this artist Rai Rai. She's great. That was a whole different experience. Like super young, people had never been on tour. Her dancers and her personal assistant. Very interesting experience. Like carrying no merch and no gear.
Wow.
But I remember, I think we did a festival in Amsterdam, and then we had some time off, so I took a week off and visited or stayed with a friend in Germany. And I think it was in that week of either on my way or there or back, I got a text from Nate, who played in a band called The Format, sang in the band called The Format, talking about his new project, Fun, and how they might need a drummer on their upcoming tour. And the interesting part there is that way back during Straylight's first record, um, while we were recording it, or before we went in to record Straylight's first record, we brought a band called we brought Nate's band, The Format, on tour, and we all loved that first Format record and loved his voice. And we were about to go into the studio to record the first Straylight record, so we actually asked Nate to come and sing on a song,
Oh
and he
wow.
did. He was in New York at some point and came up. We recorded in Woodstock, New York. So he took a train up. We picked him up, brought him into the studio, and he recorded vocals, like pretty prominent vocals, on a song called "It's for the Best." And then, over the course of the rest of Straylight's career, we kind of plateaued, peaked, and then on our way back down. By that time, The Format had actually done this really slow, steady growth. And they were actually kind of getting huge at that point. So we kind of traded places a little bit.
Mm.
And so we had history. We knew each other. So when he reached out, I was basically tour managing a hip hop artist in Europe. And when he mentioned playing drums again, it was like a no-brainer. I was just like, yes, I'll learn. I don't think I mentioned that I was in Europe and hadn't played drums in 3 months.
Yeah, no one needs to know
But
that.
but when he said next week, can you come up to New Jersey and try out 3 songs, I was like, yeah, absolutely, totally, no problem. Uh, because being on tour with you guys and watching you play every night, it was pretty bittersweet. I liked being on tour. Like, you and I have become really close and stayed really close, but not playing drums and being on tour is frustrating.
Hmm. Yeah. This was before Fun really even had taken off.
Yeah, I guess that's worth mentioning. At
Yeah.
the time, Fun was way smaller than The Format was a year prior, or 2 years prior. Um, they were writing great songs. They had an awesome record, but it was definitely an independent band. Um,
And
they
then
had actually
how?
self-released that record, and were touring.
Yeah, and then how long until were you in the band before it started blowing up the way it did?
Well, I want to say I think it was summer-ish when they asked me to audition. I came up, auditioned, and then they asked me to come play on their upcoming tour. And that was the last tour that they supported their first record. It was the end of that record cycle. So the all during that fall, and I forget what year it was, maybe 2010. Um, we did a headlining tour, which was, we were in rooms anywhere from like 400 to 1200 cap rooms. And then we did a support tour in the UK in the middle of that, for Paramore over in the UK. So, and that was awesome. Both tours were awesome, and you could tell the headlining tour in the US that we did, even though some of the shows only had 300 or 400 people in them, there was such an excitement. Like,
Yeah.
the kids were buying like so much merch. Kids were singing all the songs. They were super excited. You could definitely feel that excitement and the buzz growing. So it was a really awesome experience to like be a part of that when it's still small and special and it feels like no one else knows about it. Even though there's a bunch of people in the room and it's packed, it still feels like it's your thing, which I think is super important for fans. I think they love that experience. I mean, I love that experience when it's not, when you can tell someone about a band and they've never heard of that band. And
Yeah.
you're just like, dude, trust me, you got to see these guys live, or you got to listen to this record. And I don't know, it feels like cool or special to be the person who shows that to someone else.
Yeah, it's like you found a treasure.
Right, exactly. It's somehow special. It's a thing that you share with someone. Whereas, when you go to school or work or the gym or whatever, and everyone knows this song, it's like, yeah, the song didn't change, but there's something less intimate and less special about sharing it with someone.
Right. And so then after that tour, they did another record that was on Fueled by Ramen.
Yeah, at that point, the first record was released independently through their management company, like they own it basically, and then they went away to record. And I was just the hired gun drummer along with 2 other musicians. So the 3 guys went into the studio to record the second record, and that is what became Some Nights, which will would eventually become this kind of massive, crazy thing. So yeah, so we took that most of that year off, came back in maybe the spring, summer into fall, doing some support tours. One of the support tours actually was with Panic at the Disco, the newer version,
Mm,
Sans, you guys.
yeah.
Um, and then Janelle Monáe, we supported her on a college tour in the fall, which is also interesting because she sang some guest vocals on one of the fun songs on that record.
And
But yeah,
all these tours were once Some Nights came out.
well, no, this was like leading up to the release
Okay.
of it. So
Okay.
so that was the last tour I think we did before the record came out. So at that point, there was still the buzz and the excitement, but it wasn't big yet. And right around that fall is when things started to happen in a week. Like sort of everything that happened was crazy. I think the first thing to happen is that Glee covered "We Are Young"
Yeah.
on their TV show, which I've never still seen it, but that was huge because it was on TV and it was like the most popular show at the time. And then also it like that week it was the number one song on iTunes. So Fun hadn't released the song as a single yet. I don't think it was even out. You couldn't get the original song, but the cover was already number one on iTunes.
Oh wow.
So it was kind of insane. And everyone's just like, you know what I mean? Like the band, like I don't even think people knew the band yet to that extent, like that the mass they just knew the
The
song, but they
song.
didn't know because the original wasn't even out. They couldn't even find it. So that was crazy and exciting. And then I think the next thing a month or two later was they had the same song "We Are Young" was on some sort of Chevy commercial or something during the Super Bowl. That was like its proper like
Mm.
first big placement of the original version of the song. And those two events kind of like really established an arc. And then somewhere in between there or at that point, it started getting added to radio playlists and things like that.
Yeah, then
So that
over the next couple of years it basically was like the biggest song, and a few singles were pretty big.
that just kind of went wild. And
And
yeah,
so
it was just
and you guys toured all over the world and were playing stadiums, and then it just kind of stopped.
yeah, everything went well. I think their management did a great job of like building it slowly. We probably could have been doing bigger venues, but we like built it in a really great way and had a blast. Again, that was another moment in time that felt very special. Um, I don't know if you feel this, but there are just moments where everything seems very exciting and special and unique, and it's kind of like that lightning in a bottle, like magic moment.
Yes.
And that was one of them. I don't know
Yeah.
if I'm sorry, I'm getting a call. I need to send to voicemail.
You're fine.
I don't know if you can hear it beeping and stuff, but it's very annoying to me. So anyway, it's gone now.
Mm.
But yeah, that experience, that growth of that record cycle was super special and exciting because we didn't skip anything. And by we, I mean they and I was along for the ride. But
Yeah.
we did that first record cycle. We were doing like 1,000 cap rooms and they were getting bumped up, but they didn't immediately start booking into like 5,000. They didn't
Right.
jump to the level that they could have. They like did the smaller rooms and we did it in like one bus and a trailer. And then it was like, okay, that's too much. Actually, we had so much like gear with us because of for whatever reason, we actually broke the axle on one of our trailers. I just remember we were sitting in Detroit, like had our trailer welded by some guy, you know what I mean? Like one of
Wow.
those growing pains.
Yeah.
That was just a definitive one for me. And then it was like the next tour we went up to the like 2 to 4,000 cap rooms and we had like a second bus. And then it was like the next run was in Europe. And then when we came back, we did like a big 5,000 theatery sort of like run. And then the final thing was sort of that big summer tour with the outdoor amphitheater sort of vibes. Um, and yeah, it was really exciting, and we hit like kind of every moment and all the big festivals that I wanted to do, and most of the countries overseas that I wanted to tour in, I got to see. It was special. It was very exciting.
Yeah. But then everybody was kind of over it.
Yeah, it's hard to say because when you're a hired gun, when you're just like a touring musician, you don't really have too much say. Well, you have zero say in how things go, but you also have very little. Uh,
Insight.
yeah, you have very little insight into the like really the true inner workings.
Hmm.
Those discussions with management, with agents, interpersonal stuff within the band, that that's the point at which the door closes and people go, into a private room and have that discussion. So, people are often like, what happened? You guys were like the biggest band in the world because they see me on stage or on TV or whatever and they think I'm part of the band.
Yeah.
But I'm just like an employee. I mean, they treat me really well, and it's like we act like family at times, but I don't have decision making, and I don't need to know the inner workings of it. So, they just kind of tell me this is what's happening now, and everybody had different priorities and projects. Jack was working on the project called Bleachers, which has since then done really well, and he's even busier probably than anything else doing writing and producing. He's been super successful with that. Nate had a solo career, the singer Nate, and he was actually kind enough to ask a few of us from Fun to join him with the solo thing. So that's what I've been doing since Fun has wrapped up quite a few years now. I play the occasional show with Nate. We did a short record cycle, but at this point, it's just, sort of private shows and festivals and one offs and things like that.
Yeah, and you've kind of used your flexibility and your time to travel all over and go on these little adventures and to kind of carve out this interesting life that I'm kind of envious of.
Why, thank you. I mean, I feel like you've done a similar thing, different versions. But yes, with these one off and shows and festivals, it's been pretty amazing for me to be able to play a show somewhere and just extend my trip and explore or have a month off and say, well, instead of flying back from Florida, I'm just going to buy a motorcycle and see if I can camp my way back to Los Angeles.
Yeah, and now I see that Breaking Pangea is actually doing some reunion shows. Will you guys do anything else? Will Straylight or Fun potentially do anything else anytime soon?
Um, Breaking Pangea is doing some reunion shows, and that's very exciting. Although it is very frustrating realizing how much energy and I don't know, just youthfulness I had at 20 years old
Right.
that I don't have anymore. Like especially as a drummer, I'm sure as a guitarist, as a singer, as anything, it's difficult to do that. But as a drummer, I was just playing so much, and I was overplaying, and I was trying to play all the notes, and I would
Hmm.
throw in the bell of the ride cymbal at every possible moment, as I'm sure most musicians can either relate to as something they've done or an annoying thing that their drummer has done. Um,
It's hard to look back.
Right. And so I'm diving into it and I'm just like, oh my God, how did I play this? How did I play not just like this in this moment, but how did I play this for 9 songs of a set or 12 songs of an album? And so I've been working pretty hard to like get back to it and remember all those parts and play all those parts.
What is it, like a 20-year reunion?
It's almost 20 years. Yeah. We played one show that was like a year later, after Fred and I had both split, and Fred was in Taking Back Sunday, and I was in Straylight. We kind of did a semi reunion, but we'd only been gone a year, but it was exciting and fun for us. But that I think was in 2004, so it's been basically 15 years since the last show, possibly close to 20 since maybe the first show.
Wow.
So that's very exciting. As far as Straylight, we've talked about that, but I don't know where the priority lies or where the opportunity lies. Um, John and Sean are both super busy with Taking Back Sunday still. And then John also does a solo project sometimes when he's not on tour with Taking Back Sunday. And he plays some of the Straylight songs on that solo tour. So I think that I think John probably needs it as an outlet a little bit less than most people if they weren't playing those songs.
Are those guys joined Taking Back Sunday again?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's the craziest part of the story is that after like 7 or 8 years or whatever it was, and all these different experiences for both bands, John and Sean, who left Taking Back Sunday to start Straylight Run, or left and then started Straylight Run, have now gone back and are playing as the original lineup with Taking Back Sunday.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So John and Sean both have a very active, rewarding career touring and recording with Taking Back Sunday, and then John even has the outlet in which he can, express and communicate the Stray Light Run songs because as the writer and singer of most of those songs,
Hmm.
he's able to use that as an outlet, his solo project. So I don't think he has a huge like a need to like rekindle that because he does quite a few of those songs on his solo thing. And then timing and schedule for John and Sean with their touring schedule, it just doesn't make it as necessary. So I think that will happen because John, Sean, myself, and Michelle are all still close, and we all still like care about the music that we made. But I think it's those other factors that make it a little less of a need or an urgency or a priority.
Sure. Well, maybe we'll see a tour someday where you're literally in every band on the bill.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely been mentioned. Someone's like, you should have Breaking Banjo open for a fun tour, and then Stray Light could be direct support. And it's like, yeah, I mean, sure.
And you have some other projects too that could fill the bill.
I mean, yeah, if you wanted to make it a festival, doing the Mourners project, which is my newest like baby band, and then yeah, I mean, there's all sorts. And my solo project, Cuddle, which
Ooh.
does not get enough
Yeah.
enough notoriety,
What's
personally.
what's the genre? I forget.
Um,
It's
okay,
it's
so
something specific.
oh yeah, well, uh,
Faux lo-fi.
uh, whoa, faux lo-fi. I like that. Um, your friend and mine, the literal angel walking on Earth, Greta Morgan. Wait, is it Greta Salpeter? How does she like to be called? I don't even know.
I don't know. Greta from the Hush Sound.
Yeah, either Greta from the Hush Sound. Who? Wait, doesn't she play with like somebody crazy right now?
Vampire Weekend.
Okay, Vampire Weekend. Yeah, she is amazing. If anyone doesn't know her, I don't the only way to describe her, in my opinion, is like a literal angel. But anyway, I think she was the one who coined the term um, FOLO because
Mm.
it's a solo project. So Cuddle is this creation, but it's not because my friend Tom Martin, who's amazing and the weirdest dude in the world, he writes these songs and he kind of sounds like a crazy person. Not that I don't sound like a crazy person, but we were looking for people to sing his songs and it was getting unreliable because we're just like two random people. It's not like a production house or like a major label thing. We couldn't find someone reliable to just like record and create a project with. And I was recording at my house in Philly at the time, and I was like, Tom, I think it would be fun to recreate these songs, and I'll just play all the instruments and sing them, and we'll just see what happens. And it became a fun project. So it's a solo project, but it's not really. So Greta came up with the sweet pun of a faux solo project, which is a FOLO project. But
Yeah.
I've never heard anyone add fi at the end to imply the lo-fi because it is pretty grungy and garagey and 90s and guitar driven. So faux lo-fi is a great descriptor, I think.
There we go. Well, yeah, can't wait till the Will Noon Festival comes to a town near me.
Yeah, it's going to be great. It's going to be a festival and there's going to be 4 people.
Well, hey, thanks for taking the time to talk on the podcast.
Thank you, Jonathan, for having me. I can't wait to see you in person.